Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have Dr. Stan Tatkin back with us again. For those of you who don't know, Stan is a marriage and family therapist, clinician, researcher, and the developer of the psychobiological approach to couples therapy, what is called PAC. And so he's also a best-selling author of In Each Other's Care, which is his latest book, which is absolutely phenomenal, as well as many of his other books, including Wired for Love. Stan, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kyle. It's good to be here.
Good. So, kind of what we want to talk about is I really love your lens on helping couples learn to fight better. And so, I mean, that's what a lot of your book is on how to maintain a collaborative approach in relationships.
Right.
And one of the things that I loved about your book that I think you talk a lot about in many of your other books too, but especially in in Each Other's Care, is this idea of a two-person system
Yeah.
versus one-person system in relationships.
Right.
Why is that so important to understand when we're in these intimate partnerships?
Think of it. Imagine having you and your partner's inner legs tied together, right? Like a three-legged race. But if they were tied together and you had to do that for a month, you would get the idea of a two-person psychological system. Two independent, autonomous individuals with two different nervous systems having to move together collaboratively and cooperatively. They'd have to work with their differences in such a way that they can actually get somewhere. They wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom without doing this. They wouldn't be able to eat without doing this. They wouldn't get anything done. If one of them moved too fast, they'd both fall. So a two-person psychological system doesn't necessarily matter out in the world unless you are in a union of twos, threes, more, right, or more. In a free union, we can only do things with adults, and we have to do things with previous agreement and permission to enforce. Otherwise, people will push back. So a two-person psychological system is one that recognizes interdependence. We have the same things to gain and the same things to lose. Anything I do will affect you and will affect me in return. There is no way getting around that. It can't happen. Therefore, I have to think of you at the same time I'm considering myself, or you will confuse me as an adversary. So a one-person system is what we know very well, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just is pro-self. It's not pro-relationship at the same time. So if our heart rates go up to a certain level and we start to move more towards a hypothalamic system of fight flight, we will become much more of a one-person system because of our survival instinct. That means I'm going to take care of my interests only, which will signal to you that that's happening and will compel you to also take care of your interests only. And then we become adversarial. This is all human primates. There is no exception. Everyone will do this unless you know better or unless you're paid to work collaboratively, right? But people in a personal relationship are less likely to do that because couples tend to have the bite that fits the other person's wound, and it's very easy for people to trigger each other because of our survival instinct, which is acute. So this is a different orientation. It's a higher level of moral reasoning, a higher level of social emotional functioning that is logical, tactical, and in reality, right? There's nothing I can do to you that won't happen to me in return. All people have to do is test this out to know that it's true. So I have to know what you worry about, what you want, at the same time, taking care of myself. Otherwise, I can't influence you. We can't get anything done, right? We'll start to oppose naturally, and we will compel each other to protect ourselves.
Yep.
Right.
I love this. And I think what is so important for those who are listening to Sam talk about this is all grounded in research, right? This is pulling
Yes.
from attachment theory. This is pulling from interpersonal neurobiology, right? And so
and biology. Yeah.
right. And so it's really pulling from this concept of we have to care for each other, just like your book talks about, or we're going to struggle. And so I think the thing I want to go into is I can see people even listening of well, there's some things I can hide from my partner. I can keep some secrets and Can you talk a little bit more about how, if we do that, if we're kind of in that one person system or being a little selfish in that way, even though we don't think it's going to come back to us, how it might come back to us? Can you kind of maybe share some examples of that?
This falls in the area of safety and security. This is, I think you're referring to the free flow of information,
Mhm.
which I think is the greatest commodity between partnerships, right? So if you and I are co-executives or generals, we have to have the same information. Otherwise, we screw up, right? Our business will suffer if we're executives. Soldiers will die if we're generals. If we're parents, children will suffer. So this is about, if in this union we are equals, shared power and shared authority, and we're in charge of everyone and everything, right? Therefore, everyone and everything depends on us being happy, but also that we share information. Otherwise, the environment will try to split us, right? That's kids, that's family, that's friends, and so on. That's our fault because the left and right hand aren't being informed. And so it's a safety issue. Not only that, but it's also an ease issue, so that we're in the habit of sharing information. Neither of us can be in charge or should be in charge of what the other person should know. So when we're dealing with a social contract, such as do we tell each other everything, we have to vet that. Why would we do that? Why is that a good idea?
Mhm.
And is there anything that would be a bad part of that downstream? Would we pay for that? Would we suffer from that? Only then can we really reliably say, yeah, that's the best thing to do, even though it could be the hardest, right? Because it's purpose centered. We believe the best thing we could do to stay out of trouble, but also to create the most ease in this partnership, right? That we just say what's true. We just say we give each other the information, regardless of whether we're going to get feedback that's consequential, right? We do it because it's the greater good. We decided. Therefore, we're constantly creating social contracts based on what's good or what's right or what's best. We're using moral language here, right? Good, right, or best. We decide that, you and I, not because it'll be easy, but because it'll be good, right, or best. So we then have to do the right thing, even when it's the hardest thing to do, which is not the basic human primate
Mhm.
operations, modus operandi. We do the easiest thing. We do the most efficient or expedient thing to feel better at the cost of doing better. That's how we roll. So
Yeah.
this is upping this in terms of character and discipline and sort of ethical behavior between partners, ethics that they decide.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's what's, I mean, again, in your book and in all the work that you do, I mean, it's so powerful. You're really pushing people to be so upfront and direct and have really good clarity kind of on their shared principles, right? What
Yeah.
the agreements are that govern the relationship. And I think so many of us, we're not taught to really look at that, not taught to talk about that. Instead, we are kind of in a one person system of like, well, this is what I need and that's what you need. And we're totally separate, not how do we make agreements? How do we create that win win that you always talk about?
And,
And
and that is why relationships on the whole across the globe might not last very long. There's no organization, there's no structure that's self-created, there's no ethos, and there's no built-in structure that protects partners from each other. In other words, it's a lawless society. And that's going to erode. There's no question about it. No union can last under those conditions.
yeah, and that's what I think is so powerful. And that's what you're talking about, right? If you do the hard things now, the downstream effect is it's easier. If you
Yeah,
do the easy thing now, the downstream effect is it gets harder. And
right.
and so can you go into a little bit more detail, kind of from in your book and each other's care about how couples can start to set up that system, start to set up that structure that is harder now and get to those agreements? And what are some of those things that couples can use to do the hard stuff now so it's easier later? Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's thinking ahead, it's planning, it's dreaming, right? A relationship is a shared mythology. It is a shared mythology. You and I are imagining our relationship, right? You can't take a picture of one. It's in our heads. So we can then imagine anything we want as long as we agree and we're actually clear on what that picture image vision is.
Mhm.
And then we can start to build something that gives each other permission to get each other there, right? Two people can do that. One person's too lazy and can't do it, right? Because it needs another person.
Mhm.
So just like building a house, you would think of the architecture. Where's the room going to go? Do we want this? Do we want that? What should the roof be?
Mhm.
Or building a business. Do we know what our purpose is? Why are we doing this? And what do we want out of it? Where are we going? You know,
Mhm.
a dance troupe wants to maybe become professional and be famous, or a rock and roll band may want a record deal, or a military troop wants to survive.
Mhm.
What do we want and why are we unionizing?
Mhm.
Partners don't do that. Couples, I mean,
No, they don't.
they don't do it because there is no information, there is no model for this
Mhm.
really, except everywhere else, right? But love everywhere else. And so people go into this for reasons of love, and that has to be defined, romance, attraction, or we're getting long in the tooth. We want to get going, right? Also, we want to have kids, all sorts of other things, but they're not organized. They have no idea of themselves. Why are we? Who or what do we serve? And that's going to be their downfall. And not being organized, structured, and thinking about ourselves as co-creators of this thing, legislators, enforcers of this thing that we're building, will fall apart. Any union that doesn't have a shared mission or shared purpose or vision will start to become aggressive, like civil war,
Yep.
right? We feed on each other when we don't have a shared sense of purpose and vision that we all want to be a part of. If we don't have that, we focus on our differences and then we start to go to war. So it's an essential thing to do. That's one. Two, we have to also learn how to interact when one or both of us is under stress, because the human is built more for war than love. We have
Yep.
a very acute survival mechanism. And if we don't understand how the brain works, if we don't understand how we, as apes, right, as primates, actually operate on an automatic, autonomic basis, we will violate each other and we will naturally go to war. We will naturally start to accrue threat memory that begins to expand the array of threat cues the brain picks up in order to stay safe by pattern recognition, which is lightning fast.
Yep.
It's hardly thought, right?
Mhm.
And that's the problem of all human beings. It is built into our DNA. There's no blame here. It's not about gender. It's not about sex. It's not about where you were raised. It's not even about trauma. We are this way.
Yep.
And not understanding it means that we'll fall prey to our primitive aspects, our primitive impulses to protect ourselves, right? There's a lot of education that has to, I think of it as training for a sport,
Yeah.
right? How well can the two of you work a problem, come to a decision, solve an issue, repair a hurt? How fast can you do it and get in and get out?
Mhm.
That's a skill set
Yeah.
with knowing what not to do.
Yep. Yeah, I think
Uh,
one of the quotes that I think I'm posting on my social media soon from your book is like, unskilled interactions is the leading cause of mutual dysregulation and other components that you said that lead to the relationship demise.
yes, because it's never the subject matter. I'll talk about many times money, time, sex, mess, and kids as subjects, right? It's never the subject. The subject is the stressor. Whenever you and I are under stress or in distress, that's when we're going to start to do things that are one person oriented, pro self only, which is unfriendly. And that gets us into trouble. That gets us sued. That gets us into wars. That gets us into breaking up. All sorts of things, because we forget that we're animals. And not just animals, we're different kinds of animals. And I have to know the animal I'm with. You're different than me. I am responsible for you. I'm supposed to know how to handle you properly without using a stick or a whip or spurs, right? I'm supposed to be competent just as I would be with a baby or my child, right? It's noblesse oblige. The person in the know has the responsibility. So if you're in my care, it just goes to follow that I have to study you and be really expert on you. I am to blame in this model if you respond badly. I should have known better,
Mhm.
right? And so, with that idea of we're in each other's care, we are actually operating psychobiologically in alignment with how we're wired,
Mhm.
how we're actually wired for intimacy. And anything else could be trouble.
Yeah, and so I want to actually go back to that because I mean, just as you talk about, if you're in distress and I come to you and that amplifies that, and that
Yes.
makes it to more dysregulation, that's actually on me too. And can you
Yes.
talk about how I think so many, right? There's so much of like, oh, we're two independent people, and we take care of ourselves, and if you're upset, that's your stuff. You got to learn to communicate. You got to do that stuff. How do partners become experts on each other and really start to, just like you said, treat it like this is I gotta be competent in caring for a baby.
Well, I think there's the problem. In love relationships, the ideas are varied and they're not necessarily adult thinking. We confuse love relationships for family. We want to be taken care of. We want to be excused for a bad behavior. We want the other person to just know what we think is right or wrong without establishing it. We have entitlements, expectations. And this again speaks to organization. Without organization, I'm going to be imposing my culture, my family of origin, my experience on you, and you're going to do the same. We'll make the mistake of not creating something new that is form fit to the two of us because nobody said we had to. I don't think as this is a team sport because nobody said I had to think of this, right? I'm not oriented that way. I'm not thinking this is really a team. I may say it, but I won't do it. I want you to, but I won't. Nobody says we have to be experts on each other at all. So who was going to want to do it, right? I think you should do it with me. I don't think I should have to do it.
Right.
And then there's this other phenomena, this old trope, which is actually true. I'm unhappy. I don't know why. Oh, yeah, I just figured it out. It's you.
Mhm.
That's the human condition. When we have a falling out, I don't think about what I did to cause this baby, this child to act badly since I'm responsible, or this animal, this pet to bite me. I blame the dog and I kick it, right? I'm the idiot because I keep doing the same thing without realizing if you do this, you get bitten, right?
Mhm.
So we're not oriented this way.
No.
We would be in other areas,
Right.
right? You go into the military, special forces, you're not important. The person to your left and your right are more important than you because they're going to save your life. That's the culture that you are indoctrinized in. And it works because that is how people become heroes, is that they're protecting their friends, right? They don't care about the war. They're caring about their buddies.
Mhm.
And that's part of the culture that they're forced into. We don't have that in the greater culture.
Right.
So we have people doing all sorts of variations of what they think it should be without ever talking about it, organizing,
Right.
or growing up and doing what is necessary to get along
Mhm.
as two different people, annoying, irritating, and disappointing people,
Mhm.
right? Which all of us are.
Yep. And I think a lot of, I mean, there's people who are like, oh, I'm low maintenance, or oh, I'm fearful, I'm too much. And there's all this stuff that comes up. And again, I think it goes in that mythology that you talked about of
Yeah.
that's family culture. And then I'm expecting you to adhere to that without any explicit agreement and
Right.
dialogue and us coming to terms with that.
Or I want you to pay for the sins of my parents, or I want you to make up for what I didn't get in infancy. We do that. It's not evil. It's just human, or we don't want to spend time looking into our histories or who we are and how we roll. Nobody does that unless they suffer. Nobody has time to look at their childhood and to look at their own behavior. We have wheat to grow. We have products we have to sell. We have to survive and make money, right? Who has time to think about that? When we suffer, we're forced into having to think about these things because we lost something and we don't want to lose it again. And that's what gets us to look. So, a lot of what I'm talking about basically is growing up.
Mhm.
It's being able to tolerate pain, to be able to recognize differences and accept them, to be able to recognize loss and be able to grieve. If we can't do those things, we can't be pro social, not fully. And so this is a whole different opportunity for people to rise above the average off the line factory human primate, which is good on a good day, not good on a bad day. We have to do better. We have to raise the bar if we want a good life, right? We have to shoot for the moon together and then make each other get there.
Mhm.
That's where the permission to enforce comes in. Otherwise, we'll never do it. We're too energy conserved, too lazy.
Yeah, can we actually go into that? Because I want to talk about kind of fighting fair and collaboration. And one of the examples you use in your book was the couple already had agreements of the relationship as a priority, and one of the
Yeah.
partners wasn't holding to that agreement. I wish I had the book up right now, but there's this like beautiful way where that person pulled on, we agreed to that. That is the priority, and we're falling short on that. And like I think it was about the person was courting or something like that. That was one of the examples. Can you talk a little bit like when we have that agreement, we put the relationship first. How can we kind of, just as you said, kind of pull on that and bring that into dialogue to keep us in that collaboration and cooperation?
So let me just, if I can, back up just a bit. I'm using terms like principles and guardrails and shared principles of how we're going to govern each other. The only reason I'm coming up with those terms is to separate them in terms of hierarchy. So the way I did that is I think of rules as for kids, right? In terms of moral reasoning. Laws is for the masses, right? But principles are closely personally held values that we believe is right, good, best for us and probably for you too, right? You may not be, but I believe in these principles of morality and ethics because I drank the Kool-Aid on it and that's who I want to be. So breaking that would violate who I am.
Mhm.
A principle that you and I come up with, like, let's put the relationship first. But why should we do that? Why is that a good idea? Why would you want that selfishly for yourself? If you can't defend that reasonably, we're not ready because we have to believe in something so that when it's the hardest thing to do, we're more likely to stick to it, right? That's what we're planning for, is when it's the hardest. So why would we want that? And what does it mean? And why is it better than putting kids first or self first, right? Well, my argument is if everyone and everything depends on us being okay, then we have to be okay. We have to put ourselves first, put our oxygen mask on, or our kids die because we'll be dead first, right? So we have to be okay, otherwise everything suffers. Health, creativity, business, friends, kids, right? So that's the logic. Does that mean the kids go in a closet? No. Does that mean that if my partner is drowning and my kid is drowning, that I'm going to save my partner first? No, sorry, partner, I'm not going to do that. That doesn't mean that. It means it's organizational hierarchical in terms of decision making so that we stick to taking care of the leaders, which we are, the ambassadors, the generals, the bosses, because we're running everything. We have to be okay. That's the logic. So
Right.
if we buy into that and we believe in it, then everything that we come up with below that has to agree with it.
Mhm.
So back to your question, most agreements are broken because they were made poorly, because we didn't vet it. We didn't find out what is your selfish reason for wanting this having nothing to do with me. Because if it has anything to do with me, it'll fail. It can't be for me. We have to do it for ourselves first, but agree that it's a good idea for ourselves and for the union after questioning each other, because we're trying to make it so important that it's greater than us. Human beings do better when they believe in something greater than themselves.
Yep.
And this is not a deity. This is something you and I divined. We created
Mhm.
for reasons of survival, right? This is not a luxury. This is a survival issue.
Mhm.
For if we don't believe in anything that keeps our behavior in alignment, then we're going to hurt each other, right? We're going to violate each other's rights. All people will do that.
Mhm.
So this is about being sane. This is about planning for our devils, not our angels, because devils we are,
Mhm.
can be at least.
Right.
So back to your point, if hoarding, if the hoarding example is encroaching on as a third our rights as primary attachment partners, and this third is getting in the way with one of us feeling safe and secure.
Mhm.
I'm not important. Your stuff is more important than my comfort here. Then I can invoke, hey, wait a second. You have to care about this, right? Neither of us can lose in this gambit,
Right.
right? Therefore, you have to care that I'm unhappy. I have to care when you're unhappy. You're not doing that. And so when you have a disorder that is hard to treat, actually, in some cases, it may not be fully treatable, like hoarding.
Mhm.
You run into a nature problem. How am I going to do something I feel like I have little control over,
Mhm.
but I'm also violating something that was an agreement, a promise, a pledge.
Mhm.
Now we have a bit of a problem, right?
Mhm.
So the question is, can somebody really control that or not is debatable. Although what happens with hoarders is that they're so rigid in so many other areas that they won't play well with others. And that then may be a reason to be a deal breaker.
Mhm.
Because this is the adult world, this is based on terms and conditions.
Mhm.
And if the conditions are such that it makes it for an unhappy life for me, then we have to consider that we're not compatible.
Yeah. No, and I think that's also one of the things you do really well in the book is you talk about don't kick the can down the road.
No.
And our attachment system wants us to do that. We want to hope for the best. We want to do that. But if we don't look at this logically, we don't, it doesn't pan out on in terms of our agreements, then we got to
Right.
really reflect on that. And you really go on those deal breakers. I actually want to rewind a little bit too. I'm remembering it better. It was not the hoarding part. It was they lived in a home that one of the partners, it was one of the spouse's parents, and
Oh,
updated the furniture yet. And the partner had like, can we move? Can we do those things? And that wasn't in the budget. But then the partner was like, well, this is all your stuff. This is all your parent stuff. There's no me in here. And they were able to pull on, well, if our relationship's the priority, I'm kind of losing out and this isn't working for me. And they were able to really use that to influence buying some new furniture and updating the flooring or something like that. And can you maybe touch on that example a little bit? Because I read that and I was
yeah.
like, that just was phenomenal.
So if you consider the formula of secure functioning, which actually makes sense in this context, I can't allow you to lose because if you lose, I will pay for it, right? And so if neither of us can lose a gambit, right, and we're confined to have to figure out together two different people who want two different things, how do we accomplish that if that is what we're confined to do? We can only do that. We cannot do anything else. What happens is that we find a way. We find a way to find consensus. Everyone will do that when they're forced to. Everyone will do that. The problem is that we're not forced to. We think we don't have to do that. And so we'll cheat and we'll find a way to cheat the other to get what we want. But that's penny wise, pound foolish, because in this system, everything that happens to you will happen to me. So there's no separating that. The only thing that can keep the peace and keep us from being burdened by a history of wrongdoing, right, which we have to keep litigating, is to move with both of us fully on board first. So there's no going back. That means that you and I have to look to where we agree and where we are the same. This is above and beyond what the average human being is prepared for because the low hanging fruit is to find where we disagree and where we're different. That's what we all do. That's also built into our DNA. We otherize, we're racist creatures, right? We are by nature. Therefore, the only way around that is to rise above it and to think at a higher level that's inclusive and that also is consensus making. Now, all you have to do is think about how the United States came to be, whether you agree with the history books or not. There's one thing for sure. People got 12 different, 12, 13 different colonies, like 13 different countries who couldn't give a damn about the others to unionize against the British, could lose everything, and then to stay together when they had their own interests. How do you do that? Well, consensus makers did it by bargaining and negotiating. Partners have to do that. you and I have to find where we agree and where we are the same, moving up a level to where that will be true and not stay in the weeds, which is where we disagree, because that's easy. That's easy. We all can do that. We're trying to get consensus so we move together, right?
Mhm.
That means you want a clean house, I'm sloppy, right? And so we're going to argue till the cows come home unless one of us gets it. Do we want our house to be comfortable to live in for us visually, in terms of smell, in terms of all that? Do we want that?
Mhm.
Chances are we're both going to say yes.
Yep.
So we start where we will agree and then we work our way down
Mhm.
until we work out something that works for both of us. People rarely do that.
Right. And I think this is kind of going into the fighting fair part of, right, how do couples make sure their conflicts remain fair, respectful, and collaborative versus kind of the destructive, selfish part of me fighting for myself. And so I
Right.
think kind of the foundation of the agreements and those components. Are there any other things that you would add to make sure it stays fair and collaborative in that way?
Well, first of all, the belief and principles that we both think are good, we have to make sure we believe in it. Otherwise, we won't follow through. So the agreements have to be made properly, just as you would if you were creating a community. We're going to create a community, right? Like The Sims, the game. If we were to create The Sims, what would we create as a culture? How would we create the laws? How would we work with diversity of opinion, right? Would this be a dictatorship or would this be a democracy, right? Democracies are hard, dictatorships are easy, obviously. So, how would we do that? Well, the same thing with us, right? And we'd have to take it seriously, otherwise, we can't survive. So, first things first, people have to understand the context here that this is as serious as a heart attack. This means our survival, right? We have to do this properly. We will not last.
Mhm.
So that's one. Two, we have to be good faith actors. We have to realize that if I am bending the rules, then I'm giving you permission to bend the rules, and we're back to zero again. We're back to being the Wild West. So that's mutually assured destruction. So we have to be good faith actors, assuring that we stick to it has to be good for you and me, or it won't work, right? It won't work. It'll work for me, but it won't work in the end. So all of this falls in line when we're thinking right. It's an orientation, it's an idea.
Mhm.
We all know how to do this.
Yeah.
We all know how to do this. We just don't think we should.
In our intimate relationships.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's the problem.
Right.
That is the problem. So this isn't rocket science, but it is having to give up certain rights and privileges for something that's going to be better. We just don't believe it's going to be better. And if we're insecurely attached, we have no evidence that it will be better. We only have evidence that we're going to get the short end of the stick because that's how it's always been. So it's a hard thing for people to believe in until they start to do it, because when you start to operate this way, the rewards are immediate. And I mean immediate. When I do the right thing and when it's the hardest thing to do, my self esteem immediately shoots up. I now feel that I've accomplished something that is good and right
Mhm.
and was able to control the primitive parts of me that want, Hulk smash, that makes me want to just do what I want
Mhm.
for something better. There's an immediate reward, but we won't know that unless we do this. And it's hard, but it's worth it. Anything that's difficult to do based on ideas that are betterment, right, is worth it. Easy is you get what you pay for, which is usually not much, right? So this is really a serious thing that I believe in fully. I do it, and it's hard, you know, but I'm speaking from experience, and so are my colleagues that are doing it too. It's been done throughout history, just not enough.
Right. Well, not we're not getting that training, which I think is kind of what you're offering is like you have to operate this way for things to work. You have to work hard. You have to think not just about what's good for you, but what's good for the relationship, which means not neglecting yourself and doing what you think your partner wants. It means also bringing what you need or want and working together. And I find, at least with insecure relationships, or insecure functioning, it's really hard for partners to bring that up because they do have, just as you said, they've gotten
Right.
the end of the stick. They've been neglected. They've kind of gotten the message that they're too much, or they don't get that care, right? Or they don't have that
Right.
experience of that care. And so then when they do get to bargaining, they don't bargain very well because it's so foreign to them because again, their primitives are, this isn't going to work. And so
Right.
how do they get out of that? How do they use what you're teaching to kind of get above that and actually to be collaborative fully?
So the second thing has to do with neurobiology, and that's the manner in which you and I will interact when one or both of us is under stress. We are more likely to go to war, metaphorically, if we don't understand the nature of being human. Therefore, you and I have to understand that when in stress and dealing with a stressful topic, time isn't neutral. We have to move quickly through this because as soon as we talk about a stressful subject, our resources go down immediately. Therefore, we do not have the resources, the endurance, the ability to remain feeling safe unless we're really skillful, right? In other words, I'm watching you like a hawk as I talk for any signs that I said or did something that makes you feel insecure or safe, even in the slightest. Therefore, I have to write you, I have to take care of you immediately, or
Mhm.
I lose you as an audience.
Mhm.
Because as soon as you feel the least bit unsafe, I can't influence you. And this has to do with corticosteroids in the brain.
Mhm.
Even a little bit of glucocorticoids, stress hormones, changes how the brain operates. And I become much more selfish. I become much more suspicious, much more, concerned about me.
Mhm.
And so I can't do that myself. You're watching me. You have to see that I'm tilting to the left or right. And if we were on a tight wire, you would do that because if I get wobbly, you have to right me. Otherwise, we both fall.
Mhm.
The game is the same. So, how do we start to get into building up threat where our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases? Here's how we bring up the past. Bringing up the past will get us off road and likely not back because memory is terrible, awful, always, and we will fight about memory.
Mhm.
Wait a second, that wasn't last Wednesday.
Right.
And that wasn't her. And I didn't say that, you idiot, right? So now we're going to fight about what we remember, and we're both wrong.
Right.
So we made the mistake of going backwards, litigating the past, and not take the past as something to fix for the future. This is all about going forward. What do we do next? That's done.
Mhm.
Done is done. But if we don't take what's done and figure out what's next, we're dumb. And we are dumb because we were given by nature, we're the only species that can predict, plan, and prepare. The only species that can do that. And yet we don't. We just walk right back into the same situation live when our heart rates go up, and we're going to be automatic and reflexive. And we go, oh my God, we're in a loop. Yes, because we did predict it. So going into the past, don't do it.
Mhm.
Don't bring up the past. Don't use a hypothetical example.
Right.
Do not talk in a way that indicts the other partner because it compels them to protect themselves, right?
Mhm.
So another way of saying this, do not work on each other, work on the problem. It's a mistake to work on each other. That's war. Work on me, I'll work on you. We're done now. Game over.
Right.
We'll walk away with nothing. So work the solution, work the problem. Do not work on each other. So we're talking about we and us. Do we want this? How about this? Well, I know this happens. And I know I'm thinking about you when I'm thinking about this guardrail, but remember, I could do it too. And there are things that I do that you don't want me to do anymore either. So this is for both of us, not one of us. We're reminding each other. Imagine if I said to you when we're dealing with something where we're opposed,
Mhm.
I say to you, I pledge to you here now, you are not going to lose. I will make sure of it. I cannot afford for you to lose. I'm not going to lose either,
Mhm.
right? Neither of us will lose. We're just going to have to keep working this puzzle until we both find a way that where we both get what we want. Enough to not look backward.
Right.
That's doable. If I signal to you or even state it to you, you're not going to lose. Would you then immediately relax if you believe me? Yes, you would, because that's not going to be in your mind when you're under stress. When you're under stress, you're wondering based on history what this person is going to do again. That is going to cause you stress, pain, to not be considered.
Mhm.
So we reassure more than defend. Reassurance more than defend. I don't assume you know that I mean good. I'm going to let you know that I know that I've done these things in the past that have hurt you. I'm aware of it. I did this, did this, I did this. I do not blame you for not trusting me right now. You have every reason to. I'm not going to do that. And if I do, tell me and I will apologize and I will reverse it because that I shouldn't be doing that. So we're assuring each other that we're going to be fair and just as we move, and then we prove it by being responsive to the other person's complaint that that's not fair.
Mhm.
Or we're responsive to the other person who says, okay, all right, well, let's just do it. I'm not going to let that happen because I know that that causes downstream effects. So I say, no, let's go back to the drawing board. How about if we do this? Would that make you happy?
Mhm.
So bargaining in this case is not transactional for those who are interested in moral thinking, right? Transactional thinking is at the level of criminality. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, but if you screw me, you're dead, right?
Right.
That's not this. This kind of bargaining is for a higher purpose. It's to keep the relationship the most important thing. It's more important than being right. It's more important than my getting my point out.
Mhm.
It's more important. So we do anything necessary to get what we want, but also make sure the other person is whole, right? So bargaining means I'm going to make it worth your while in a good way to do this with me because I want to be with you.
Right. I'm choosing you.
Right. Because the easy thing would be, okay, you just do that and I'll do this. And that starts a problem called drift.
Mhm.
It's so easy that we'll continue doing it. But if the game is we move together, we want to be together because that's how we influence each other, then we must be strategic and clever and fair and just in our way of getting that person on board.
Right.
It's a higher level of social emotional intelligence if we want that.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I just club you.
Right. And then you club me back and we're in our war.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing. We walk away with nothing, actually.
Right.
It's,
Exactly.
it's stupid.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing is just one last thing. If the world is a dangerous place, and it is, if the world is uncaring, and it is, if people are selfish, and we are, all of us, if the world is exploitive and opportunistic, yes, then we cannot be because it's stupid to unionize. Why unionize with cannibals who are going to kill you? They should be the outsiders, right? We should be protecting each other from them.
Mhm.
So the war cannot be in your own foxhole. That's Darwinian. You're just not going to survive. That's
Right.
dumb. And this is another metaphor, if people want to use it. You cannot afford to be adversaries. You cannot. That's self destructive,
Mhm.
it's self harming. You have to be. You have to be allies because the basic rule of unionizing first is to be safe in anything, a business, anything.
Mhm.
And to violate that, just, what's the purpose then? Why are you even doing this? You can get a Rottweiler to scare you. Yeah.
Exactly.
So a lot of this is really our stupidity because we are so selfish, so self centered naturally, so impulsive, so opportunistic that we fail to realize that in this kind of union, it's suicide.
Yeah. And I think that's what so many of us, again, we do that, just as you said, we do the same thing over and over again. We set the trap, we fall in the trap, and then we go, oh, the trap will be different. And then we come back and we fall in it again, and we're like, well, what's wrong? Well, it's my
Right.
partner. My partner is the reason that this trap is keep coming up. And we're not working together. We're not bargaining. We're not signaling the safety and security that signals to my partner, I'm caring for you and I need to be cared for. And we have to do this together. And I think that's what's so beautiful about your work, and especially this book of In Each Other's Care, is it articulates so much of that. And one of the things I really loved even more about your book is you give examples of fights that couples have, typical
Yeah.
conflicts that they have, and you walk through this is where it went off the rails. This was a bad move. This was a dumb move. Here's how to do it collaboratively. Here's how to do it according to these principles that will actually help strengthen the relationship and strengthen that union and keep you two in each other's care.
And make you productive and be able to actually soar and thrive instead of just stay in survival mode.
And I think that's what's so beautiful about your work. And again, your book is it's helping people get to that higher level of functioning, that maturity to collaborate and thrive in their relationships and in life. Because if, just as you said, the relationship isn't thriving, all else is failing too.
All else is failing. And I can tell you, I'm not an easy person. I'm as selfish and self-centered as the rest of them. There's nothing special about me at all. This is very hard for me, but it is worth it. I can tell you it is worth it. And Tracy, my wife, and I would not be as thriving as we are if we didn't work this way. We wouldn't. We wouldn't have the resources to do it. So it is the hard thing to do. But your life is short, right? We're all going to be dead soon. It is what you're going to make it, right? You can't control the outside forces, but you can control who you're going to team up with. And you can control if the two of you are actually in alignment or if you're pointing in different directions. You can do that. Mm-hmm. Now, here's one problem I should state. We have a biological issue called attachment. It's nature's glue. Mm-hmm. It's there to keep us around to raise a child, to stay in groups, to protect ourselves in herds, right? We're herd animals. Right. So it's a good thing, but it isn't love. We confuse it with love. And so it's the I can't quit you biology, even though I should. So if you're playing unfair, the attachment system will make it very difficult for me to stand up to you and stand up for the principles we created, because the first thing I think of is an existential threat, a survival threat of losing you. Mm-hmm. This makes doing the right thing even harder. But it takes faith that the attachment system also makes it as hard for you to lose me as it is for me to lose you. And we'll forget that. And so standing up to a principle and holding you to account is a good faith act that suggests you don't want to lose me any more than I want to lose you. Therefore, you're going to do it. Right. If you don't care as much about losing me, I didn't really have anything, because that's our only leverage. Right. Otherwise, we'll do whatever we want. And so it's a complicated, this is a biology that makes things very complicated.
It does. And so many people stay in relationships without those agreements, without those principles, and just go, oh, my partner's going to change. Or if I just change how I show up without talking about it, just as you said, our attachment will cause us to kick the can down the road. And that, particularly if you, like in the example, you talk about one partner can't live without having a kid, and the other partner can't live with having a kid, right? Yeah. And that is a deal breaker, as you said. But so many people will kick that months down the line, years down the line, without actually facing that because of that existential crisis. Our attachment does,
which goes right to infancy. It's primitive. It is a part of us feels its death.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that separation. Oh my gosh, if they separate from me, I die.
Right.
And that then gets in the way of the what you're proposing is this, okay, understand that, know your biology, know your attachment system, and really think about what's good for me and what's good for the person I'm with. And if it's not good for us, then we got to really look at that and not keep sitting here trying to kick the can down the road and wait for some magical thing to really change.
Right. And by the way, all of this is human. People have got to start giving each other a break. Mm-hmm. We are much more determined than we think. We are determined. There is no escaping our history. That's a fantasy. All we can do is try to do better, but we cannot wholly do that. We are a product of generations of culture, generations of behavior, generations of abuse, generations of mismanagement, right? That is a fact. Everything we're talking about is absolutely the part of the human condition. It is a way we are, all of us, right? And the only way around it is to accept that as a reality and stop thinking about, oh, what is a healthy relationship? No, There is no such thing. Nobody can say what a healthy relationship. Who's the decider of that?
Right.
Can it work? Can the relationship, the way we are playing it, can it possibly work? The way we do business, can it work? Not who we are. Who we are is already determined. We are different. We are a pain in the asses. We're burdens, right? We're never on the same page completely ever. That's a fantasy. We can approximate each other. That's good enough. Can the way we do this work? That's what people should think about. And that's not personal. That's tactical.
Right.
Right. But unfortunately, we're prone to take everything personally.
Yep, we are. And I just on kind of a closing note, I mean, I think everyone who's listening to this, again, if you want to learn more about this, grow on this and create this into your life. I mean, I have my therapy clients are like, I really want to work on having that secure functional relationship. This is how we got to start with that. And they are using your book as kind of a process for that. And I would highly recommend anyone who's listening, if you're seeing this and going, oh, wow, okay, I'm seeing we are kind of enacting our myths on each other and we're not really talking, we're not really collaborating, we feel more kind of like we're selfish, really use Stan's book. And if you want a pack therapist, and I mean, Stan, you also do your retreats too that are profoundly powerful. And so I would highly recommend anyone who's listening to check those out. And I will definitely include those in the links as well.
And by the way, we are selfish. There's no getting around that. We are. So appeal to the selfishness. Appeal to the selfishness as a way to get collaboration and cooperation. Call each other selfish. I know you are, but what am I, basically? Yeah, I'm looking right at you. The same. We are all selfish. Even altruism is selfish because of what we get for it. Right. So it's interpersonal and selfish. Pro-self and pro-relationship is what we want to be.
Yeah, and I think that, again, goes back to bringing ourselves to the relationship and thinking about what's good for our partner and how do we collaborate so that works. And that's like the foundation of what you're really helping so many of us use our understanding of biology and neurobiology and attachment to actually do.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All you have to do is take a look at what's going on around us. What's going on around us is the same thing that happens in partnerships. No shared mission, no shared purpose, no shared vision. We tribalize, we fragment, we turn against each other. We focus on differences. There's no collaboration, no cooperation, no reaching across the aisle to what the other person wants. It is strictly the same thing.
Yep.
Same thing happening all over again on the macro level, on the micro level.
Exactly. Well, Stan, I just want to say thank you again for all the work you do. Thank you for talking with me and giving so many of my listeners and my community members, again, you as a resource to help them with their relationships, and highly recommend anything that Stan creates. And Stan, thanks again for being here and sharing your wisdom.
I love talking with you, Kyle. It really is very stimulating to talk and fun to talk about this with you.
Oh, it's been phenomenal. I really appreciate it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.